So let's talk ancient cities. Welcome. I'm Pink Spirited, and today I actually have a theory that flies in the face of the accepted narrative about those cities. And I have the experiments to back it up. So, first, let's get into the lore, and then I'll tell you why everything you think you know about the ancient cities is wrong. Once, long ago, ancient builders controlled the overworld. The overworld was populated by agents who tended to dabble in things better left alone. Their power was great and their knowledge was vast, but they were curious creatures who always craved more. More knowledge, more power. They learned to traverse dimensions and set up fortresses in the nether, where they continued their experiments. And there they managed to acquire the knowledge of redstone and the skill of enchanting. But their experiments also had devastating results, like the creation of the powerful wither and the plague, which doomed their deceased brethren to rise again and again and again as zombies and skeletons. In this ancient civilization, there lived a sect of ancient builders who planned to escape this fate. All the builders needed to escape this dangerous world, but this sect decided to do so by fleeing the surface. And so the sect came down. Down, 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 leaving everything behind, down as far as they could get, down to Deep Slate, where mobs did not form. And they decided here's where they would build their city, safe from the zombies above, safe from the wither above, safe from the other ancients. Having left everything behind, they started from scratch. Without the help of enchantments, they built their first homes and buildings using cobbled deep slate. As society advanced, they learned once again the art of masonry and cut stones to build more elaborate homes and structures. We can see the things they deemed important and built with those cut stones have survived, more or less. Great pillars to reinforce and hold up the ceiling and prevent cave-ins as they continued to dig out deep slate and expand the city. The barracks to house the soldiers and their weapons in the event of war, perhaps by the ancients and plague they left on the surface. The sauna, which most likely acted as a communal bathhouse for the city. The icebox, which held the city's food and rations. The city walkways, which became much more important in the latter years. Small monuments and tombs. The siege walls. The great entrance and the gigantic pillars that line it, and most importantly, the great warden monument. And as they advanced, they also learned to enchant again, as evidenced by the enchanted items in chests. But while they were down there, they ran across a peculiar organism they hadn't quite seen before, and they named it Skulk. In the end, the Deep Slate Ancients were ancient builders through and through, and in them they carried the same curiosity. Thus they began to run experiments on the Skulk, and it was due to these experiments, and possibly not so happy accidents, that they learned Skulk spreads through a catalyst. But in order for the Skulk to spread, they needed something very specific. They needed souls. The deceased knowledge, also known as experience, is stored into the Skulk, and the body and soul is consumed by it. And through that, the Skulk grows, spreads, and creates more of itself. And as more experience is stored and more souls consumed, rarer types of Skulk were generated. And due to that generation, they probably learned pretty early on about Shriekers and the Warden. Once the Skulk's defense mechanism, the Shriekers, were triggered, it drew upon the stolen experience, bone, and souls from the deceased to manifest and power the Warden to protect it. The Warden was a force of nature, strong and seemingly invincible. It's no wonder the Deep Slate ancients adopted him as a sort of national symbol. In honor of him, they built monuments, configured buildings and walkways to include his likeness. They built a long pathway like the spine of a warden that led all the way up to the giant monumental head at the center of the city. And as they lived that way, it's no surprise that a death cult formed around the mighty warden. The warden, who nevertheless needed the power of the dead to manifest. Still, they worked around the generally benign Skulk and put down wool in an abundance of caution to make sure they didn't set off any hidden Shriekers, which would possibly trigger the Skulk's defense mechanism. They used the sensors as a sort of redstone component, and having seen the potential of the power of souls, they experimented. And it's possible that they managed to get the portal to work. What was on the other side? A new world? A Skulk world? We may never know, because that's when the ancients from the overworld decided they'd had enough and made their move. The overworld society had been crippled by the plague they themselves created, and the wither which they had found was uncontrollable and extremely destructive. They envied the Deep Slate agents, their safety and their knowledge. Unfortunately, they didn't have a full understanding of the workings of the ancient cities and their Skulk neighbors. Had they known, they may have chosen another option. Instead, they attacked the ancient city. And as they attacked the Deep Slate ancients, builders brought with them the plague. As the enemy soldiers ravaged the city, they didn't notice the Skulk activating, but Deep Slate builders were very aware of it. But what could they do? Each now zombified comrade they were forced to put down added to the Skulk. Each invading soldier, each citizen fighting for their new home spread it. The catalyst metabolized them all, over and over, spreading Skulk farther and farther, making new catalysts, new sensors, new Shriekers, and eventually, inevitably, the Skulk's defense mechanism was triggered, and the Warden was called. In the middle of this war between the ancients, the Warden wreaked havoc, destroying anything that moved, whether that be ancient builders, the zombies that the plague had reduced them to, or even something as innocuous as a bat. Everything had to die. The Deep Slate builders, very familiar with the Warden, retreated to the siege walls and inside the hidden room where sound was muffled. Some may even have escaped through the portal. The overworld builders were not so lucky. As the final zombie died, and the Warden could hear no more sounds of life, he retreated, and the Deep Slate ancients were left to rebuild the decimated city. But the war and the Warden's rampage had been brutal. It had drained them not only of citizens, but of knowledge. Those who knew how to enchant or to cut stone were either no longer in this dimension or no longer alive. They now resided in the Skulk. What was left of the Deep Slate ancients were left to rebuild. Cobblestone houses, some left in ruins and others now simply vacant, all of them were used as material. They used that cobblestone to reinforce buildings that were attacked and partially destroyed by the invading army. Chambers, the icebox, the barracks were all reinforced. And most importantly, the Warden's head monument. The ancients attempted to move on. They had come down with nothing initially. They could certainly rebuild their society again. But now, something was different. The amount of Skulk that had formed, the amount of rare new Skulk entities that were now present, made living in the ancient city all but impossible. Every step was a time bomb. Places that they had made sure to keep free of Skulk previously were just no longer safe. Shriekers and sensors were everywhere, and although they could ward off and distract the warden with snowballs from the icebox, that wasn't feasible in the long run. And so, they abandoned the city. Maybe through the portal, or maybe simply back above ground. But they did move on to find someplace safer, away from the warden, and hopefully the wither. The ancient city was left to the Skulk, abandoned and in silence. Time moved on, and one day, very curious creatures found this ancient city. They were the Illagers. It's not clear whether they had a run-in themselves or whether they learned knowledge from the ancient builders who'd previously been there. But what we can tell by the structures that they built is that they knew of the warden and they took precautions. The Illagers brought down wool once they found the ancient city and put it all around their base camp. They built structures and they built fail-safes. It was clear the Illagers were very wary of the warden, in a way that the ancient builders really hadn't been. They'd used spare cobble from what few buildings remained to build their base camp, and the pillars of their outposts. They used dark wood to make 2-block-high bridges that would stop the warden, keep him at a distance. But eventually, they too abandoned the ancient city, or perhaps were destroyed while they were in it. But for whatever reason, the ancient city sat vacant and barren until we came, curious and dangerously ignorant. Now you've heard the story of the ancient cities. Let's talk about the misconceptions. It's generally accepted that the ancients brought the Skulk from another dimension, that this head is a portal, but I challenge that. The Skulk is in many deep darks around the world, and those don't all have ancient cities. So how did the Skulk get there? Skulk doesn't walk, it doesn't travel. The way that it spreads is only through the acquisition of souls, the acquisition of experience, the acquisition of lives. So how are there pockets of Skulk randomly thousands of blocks away from ancient cities? I posit that the Skulk is native to the overworld, that when the ancient builders came down and built their houses, the Skulk was already there, and through trial and error and catalysts, they learned what the Skulk could do. And because they knew, they built their cities accordingly. On the off chance that a shrieker might accidentally spawn, they put wool on the walkways out of an abundance of caution. Not because they were trying to live in harmony with the warden, but to keep him from spawning, to keep the Skulk's defensive mechanism from triggering. Now, why do I say that? I say it because this city was not made to contain or even hold off the warden. If you'll notice, the Illagers built the bridges 2 blocks high, not the ancient builders. Additionally, the walkways are all 3 blocks high, 1 block wide. The warden only needs 1 block wide and 3 blocks high in order to navigate any opening. These would have been very easy for the warden to come after you when you're running down a hallway. I told you earlier that I did an experiment. I died. A lot. This experiment showed me that this wall would not have been a deterrent for the warden. This would not have kept the warden out of the moat. And once in the moat, if you were on the pedestal, you were in serious danger. Okay, game plan is get the warden to chase me all the way up to the portal and see how feasible this is. Go time. Okay, he's there. He's trapped. So now that you signal, what did I just hear? Did he fall? Oh! 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 Oh my god! 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 Run! Escape! Abort! Abort! Oh. So maybe let's fix the wall first. Yeah, that's fine. It's not fine. How did he get down there? Through here? Okay. Let's try again. I'm not really. Ah. He just wiggles right through there, doesn't he? How'd they expect him to stay on here? Oh my god, why? Why? Where did... I have now fixed the entire front wall, so he should not be able to get down. Did I hear him shuffle? I hear him do a little shuffle. Where is he? Still on the thing? This is nerve-wracking. But look, the signal doesn't just go to the lights, it also goes to him. Oh! Oh! I was too close. I was too close. Yeah, no. This wall did not keep the warden on it. The openings are just too big. I actually had to put more blocks to keep him on the wall and out of the moat. He very easily slipped through. And once he was in the moat, he could very easily get through the doors off the sides of the moat and into the city proper. No, this was not made to contain the warden. If you notice, once you walk out the doors, the path splits. There's a pathway on each side, almost like crowd control. Maybe this moat was to protect the citizens. All the citizens could stream in on a normal day to worship at the Great Warden Head, or to hunker down during a siege on their city. And the soldiers would be on top of the wall, shooting arrows through the 1 block wide openings. Additionally, the walkway that I'm calling the spine is not padded. It has absolutely no carpet. So some people say, oh, that's to draw the warden up to the portal so he can hear you as you run. I disagree. We just established that drawing the warden up to the portal doesn't really seem to have been the intent. I think that this was ceremonial, so that the ancient builders, when they went off to war, the city could hear this clomp of the soldiers as they paraded down the entrance and out of the city. If the wall was meant to hold the warden, it was very badly designed. The signal lights, using sensors, require you to come a bit too close to the moat. They put you dangerously close to the warden that would be on the wall, so he can get you from this distance with his sonic blasts. These lights were not made with the intent of the warden being on the wall. They're signals, but for what, I'm not 100% sure. Additionally, if the warden was on the wall, jumping up and down actually makes enough vibration to open the secret door below. And if the warden is on the wall, how would you get to that secret opening? If the walls have 1 block wide slots, how does one avoid the warden coming after you? The warden may have been the downfall of the city, but he wasn't intentionally called. Retro Gaming now believes that this may not be a portal at all. Maybe it's an artificial catalyst, which is why we see so many enchanted items throughout the city. I think that's a good a reason as any, but in my heart of hearts, I hope that this was a portal. Hopefully to someplace better. And hopefully, the ancient builders were able to escape. The plague, the wither, and the warden. And that's my theory of the ancient city. I hope that you liked it. If you did, please comment and subscribe and come back again, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.